It is my nerd world, and it's positively Star Wars. I'm John Justice, and I'm glad you're with the show again this week. If you're looking for a place to listen to somebody and to hear listener feedback from people who unabashedly love Star Wars, you have absolutely come to the right place. I would go so far as to say I'm kind of a Star Wars apologist. So here's the deal. And for those who have listened to the show for a while, you know what the show is all about. But if you're new to the show, I say Star Wars apologist, but that probably is not a fair thing to say. The way that I treat my Star Wars fandom and my love of a galaxy far, far away, I treat it like the 47-year-old man that I am through the eyes of the child that was so influenced by this amazing storytelling. When I was a kid, seeing A New Hope and The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, and then as I got older, the prequels, right? And now the sequel trilogy. But when I was a kid and I saw those original trilogy movies, starting with A New Hope when I was 5 years old in the theaters, I didn't care about inconsistencies. I didn't care about the minutia detail. It didn't matter because I was having so much fun watching these movies. And I was just there for the good time and the adventure and the friendship and the romance and the intrigue and the villains and the ships and the lasers and the explosions, all of that stuff. And that's just the type of attitude that I've always had when it comes to Star Wars. It's why I started doing this podcast those years ago before The Force Awakens came out. And it's why in this new year of 2020, I've changed the name of the show to Positively Star Wars. So that if you're a fan looking for just fun, positive talk about a galaxy far, far away, this is the place where you are going to find it. We have a ton of listener feedback to get to this week, and we have a few news items, and I do want to talk a little bit more about The Rise of Skywalker. I just got out of my 9th viewing of the movie, and as I say every week since it's been released, I just absolutely love The Rise of Skywalker. It is such a fun ride. I picked up my 17-year-old son from high school. They got out early. It's snowing like crazy outside. It looks like Hoth. I know that's a bad dad joke. But I picked up my son Logan, and we told him that the wife and I had gone to go see The Rise of Skywalker. That was her 6th time, I think, 7th, which is unheard of, by the way. But he was like, hey, did you guys have fun? I said, yeah, of course I had fun. I love this movie. And then he asked me, what's your favorite part? And I had a hard time zeroing in on anything because I love every part of this movie. There's no part of The Rise of Skywalker that bores me in any way, shape, or form. So we'll get to more Rise of Skywalker talk before we dive into listener feedback. But we do have some news to get to this week in the heart of the show before we dive into the listener feedback. Let's start off here. So earlier this week, the original director for Episode 9 was Colin Trevorrow. Colin Trevorrow, who had directed Jurassic World, had written and produced Fallen Kingdom. I really enjoy both of those movies. Really like Jurassic World. Was tapped to do Episode 9 before he was yanked from the project after Carrie Fisher's untimely passing. Well, now we know what his story would have been. The script has essentially been leaked online, and what we've been getting are not the actual script in our hands, but what we have been looking at is basically a detailed breakdown and synopsis of the movie. So I have it here in front of me, right? I have the whole thing here. I'm not going to go through all of it. Let me share with you just the beginning part of it, what the crawl would have been and sort of the basic plot of the film, and then I want to add my thoughts. And I'm going to explain why I'm not going to go into detail on this, by the way. So the crawl would have been, essentially, and I don't know if this is word for word, but this was the crawl. The First Order is everywhere. Ren is on a quest to dig up ancient dark side stuff. Obviously, this is not the crawl, but this is what the crawl, basically, the gist of it was. Ren is on a quest to dig up ancient dark side stuff, and the Knights of Ren search for Rey. The Resistance plan a secret mission to light the fire of revolution. So a transmission has been jammed and the resistance can't communicate. Once the Friends steal a cache of weapons from the First Order, they prepare to attack the capital of the First Order. And then Rey goes to the Jedi Spire of Ossus and sends a message out to the galaxy to join them in a fight. And in the meantime, Kylo Ren is trying to kill Rey so he can finally be fully consumed by the dark side. So I've been through a couple of different versions of this, and I'll be straight up honest with you. I don't particularly care for what Colin Trevorrow had put together in what I read. From my point of view, I can understand why Disney and Lucasfilm did not want to move forward on this. It is a fun read from the angle of it's just more a curiosity, and it's interesting to see where he would have gone. And we're talking about Star Wars, so you're looking at a potential of what a Star Wars movie could be. Here's the deal. If you want to go and take a look at it, it can be, if you go on Reddit, if you go to the Reddit Leaks page, you can find the complete breakdown there. There's a couple of podcasters and YouTubers who have put out this information in full. MakingStarWars.net this is where I pulled my article from. MakingStarWars.net has an extensive article that lays out everything that Jason Ward knows about what the Colin Trevorrow script would have looked like and the movie would have looked like. I'm not going to break it all down on the show, and I'm going to be completely upfront and honest with you like I always am, because I don't really care. I don't. This is not a film that's going to be made. It is not the movie that we got, and I'm cool with that. And because of those reasons, I just like to look forward. Now, granted, I'm curious like everybody else is. I mean, I've gone through and I've read almost this entire thing, and there's a lot here to take in. And I thought a lot about whether or not I wanted to go through the whole thing top to bottom on the show and break it all down. But I've heard some other shows do that already. And again, being completely honest with you, I didn't find it all that interesting or compelling. What I heard other Star Wars podcasting hosts do is they got in this weird headspace where suddenly they were crafting their own version of a Star Wars movie that they would want to see. There's nothing wrong with that. Don't misunderstand. If people want to speculate, I speculate all the time on the show, right? However, anybody wants to go and do their particular Star Wars show, that's up to them. I just know for me as a listener, what I'm hearing are individuals who are saying, well, the movie would have been better if they had grabbed this from Colin Trevorrow's script, or if they had taken what Colin Trevorrow did and then added in what J.J. Abrams did. Maybe J.J. Abrams and Colin Trevorrow should go and work together, and they should have done, and we could have had a better movie. Well, it's like, no, that's a version of the film that's never going to exist. The version that Colin Trevorrow was going to do is never going to happen. And you're basically putting together like a best of a movie that you would want to see, and that's cool. I just don't see any fun in that. I would much rather talk about what we're going to get. We're going to talk a bit about that in just a moment. I'd rather talk about that and what we've already gotten. That, to me, is a lot more fun, right? So if you want to go and get the full breakdown of what Colin Trevorrow would have done with Episode 9, again, go to MakingStarWars.net or go to the Reddit Leaks page, and you can check it out there. I was initially excited for Colin Trevorrow to be directing Episode 9 prior to J.J. Abrams taking it back over. I did like Jurassic World quite a lot. I still do. And I thought that Colin Trevorrow potentially could have done a good job in mirroring the vibe of what we got in the original trilogy. Because, in my opinion, Return of the Jedi is probably the most lighthearted of all the Star Wars movies. Okay? And I felt like Colin Trevorrow could come in and bring that more straightforward style and lightheartedness to that final film. And that was when he was tapped to go and direct it. Once he was let go and J.J. Abrams was bought on, I was totally fine because I love J.J. Abrams as a director, and subsequently I love what we got in The Rise of Skywalker. And so there was no love lost for me with Colin Trevorrow not doing Episode 9. I am completely fine with the fact that he did not do Episode 9. Because it sounds like a hot mess, to be honest with you. So go and check it out. And listen, if you want to comment about Colin Trevorrow's potential script and what your thoughts were between now and next week's show, please, by all means, feel free. I'd love to know what your thoughts are. I want to add, though, that I do think it's unfortunate that we, to a certain extent, I think it's unfortunate that we're so easily able to obtain this type of information, because I don't really think in the big picture it does the fandom any good. I really don't. And I know that nothing is going to change. This is just the way the pop culture is now. Everything is going to get reported on from now until, we're all gone and they're still making Star Wars movies. But every director move and every writer move and all the rumors of reshoots and all that, I just don't see how it benefits the fandom. I don't think that's what the studios want. I don't think that's what the directors and the writers want, and it's just the world we live in. And so when things like this get leaked, especially so close to the release, like if Colin Trevorrow's script got leaked a year from now, right? It's a different ballgame. The movie's been out for a while. We own the Blu-ray, it's on Disney Plus. It's a completely different situation. But I just went and saw it. The movie's still in theaters, and yet I have here a complete breakdown of what the movie could have been. And now what you have are a lot of people who were turned off by the Rise of Skywalker for different decisions that are now zeroing in on Colin Trevorrow's treatment and basically going, "Well, if we had gotten that, I would have been better." Or again, this is why I do the podcast. Because I don't want to be like that. So if you want to comment on it, though, please, by all means, feel free. If you've read through it and you want to share your thoughts on it, we can get into more of it coming up on listener feedback next week. All right, let's get to the other news. So we know there's a movie coming in 2022. We are supposed to, allegedly, get an official announcement of the director of that film and what that film is going to be. We've already had some rumors floating around out there that it's going to be 400 years, or a movie is going to be 400 years prior to The Phantom Menace, which is also part of Project Luminous, and we discussed that at length on last week's show. But we still haven't heard who is going to be directing this 2022 movie, if that's what the 2022 movie is going to be. So we're still waiting on that. We know that Kevin Feige has been talked about directing a Star Wars film, who's the head of Marvel, but that may be several years out. I have an article here in front of me, though, that I want to share with you from The Hollywood Reporter, and it goes like this. Following the recent installment of Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker, the space fantasy franchise is set to go on pause in terms of theatrical movies. So what does that mean for the process? But that does not mean that the process has ground to a halt. It's unclear where things stand, but Taika Waititi is being courted for a Star Wars movie. It's unclear whether the project is separate from the one being developed by Kevin Feige, with whom he closely worked on with Thor Ragnarok, or a separate Star Wars project altogether. Disney and Lucasfilm producers of the Star Wars movies have no comment right now. The movie comes as two Star Wars streams arc in different directions. Waititi is coming off great acclaim from the fan community for directing the final episode of Season 1 of The Mandalorian. Additionally, Jojo Rabbit, which he wrote and directed earlier this week, earned 6 Oscar nominations, including for Best Picture. Separately, there's a sense that Mandalorian could be acting as a training and testing ground, and we've talked about this on the show, for directors hoping for a larger role in Star Wars. Deborah Chow, who became the first female director to helm anything Star Wars, is now readying to direct the next Star Wars series, the one focusing on Jedi Master Obi-Wan Kenobi, with Ewan McGregor set to reprise the role. Now, here's something interesting, quick little sidebar. Right as I went to go record the show this week, there was some rumors floating around online that the Obi-Wan Kenobi show was in jeopardy and that Ewan McGregor had left the production due to creative differences. At the moment, it seems like some rando clickbait website has decided to run with the story, unsourced, fake pop culture news, and it started spreading like wildfire as it does. And this goes back to what I was talking about. This goes back to the fact that there are too many people out there right now that try to take advantage of the negativity in Star Wars and try to capitalize on any time there is some of the tiniest rumors, or they just make stuff up. So we don't have any official confirmation that anything is going on with the Obi-Wan Kenobi show. I don't trust this particular website as far as I can throw them. It falls in line with like comic book news, and I don't even know what this one was. I'm not even going to bother giving them a name title. It might have been Mike Zero, for crying out loud. I don't put any stock in this at all until it's official from Lucasfilm, and it makes no sense whatsoever, and everybody seems to be, within the course of the past hour, seems to be landing on this is probably just a rumor that's getting spread around because people like to talk negative about Star Wars, and there's no validity to it whatsoever. Okay, so back to Taika Waititi. Even if Waititi were to accept the challenge of taking on the Jedi, according to The Hollywood Reporter, the Sith and assorted scum and villainy, there is still a question of timing. The filmmaker has emerged as one of the most sought after in town, and his ability to oscillate tones, scope, and budgets. And I'm going to get to this, right? He's in post-production on his small budget dramedy Next Goal Wins for Fox Searchlight. No release date has been set for that. And he's also going to helm Thor Love and Thunder, which is eyeing a late summer production start. That picture has a November 5th, 2021 release date. Okay, so you consider they're probably going to lock that film sometime late next year. I don't know if that gives Taika Waititi enough time to do the 2022 movie. My guess is that if this is true, that this is not going to be the 2022 movie. My guess is whatever that 2022 movie is already knee-deep into pre-production, concept art, and the writing process. And I imagine that Disney and Lucasfilm put that 2022 date on the calendar because it was going to put some distance between the end of the Skywalker saga and the rise of Skywalker. It would give Disney Plus some time to breathe with these live-action shows. Clone Wars starting here in about a month from now. We've got Mandalorian Season 2 later on this year. We've got the Obi-Wan Kenobi series. We've got the Cassian Andor series. There's been some speculation that there's actually been a secret series that's been in the works for a while. There was a rumor that broke late last week that Rebels was going to be coming back for another season that would chronicle Ahsoka and Sabine searching for Ezra. So Disney's got a lot of content they're going to be pumping out between now and 2022 when that next movie is going to come out. And I imagine that whoever is going to be in charge of that 2022 movie, they're going to be giving them as much time as humanly possible to make sure that they zero in, they hone in on the story, the script is good, the cast is good, and that there is no rush whatsoever so that that 2022 film delivers in the way that it needs to deliver. Because there's a lot riding on Star Wars when it comes to that next theatrical film. I would not be surprised in the least bit if that 2022 movie ends up being a top-tier director. And the first name that pops into my head is Steven Spielberg. Nobody has talked about that. I don't think I've mentioned on the show. I've talked about Spielberg directing a Star Wars movie before. He was supposed to originally do The Phantom Menace, for those that don't know. And I was watching Ready Player One the other night, and I was thinking to myself, it would be, in my opinion, a really, really smart move for Kathleen Kennedy to bring in Steven Spielberg for one Star Wars movie. I just think that's a match made in heaven. You get Steven Spielberg to come in and do a Star Wars movie, and he knows George Lucas, so potentially he can consult with him. Maybe he's the one who starts off this High Republic or whatever it's supposed to be 400 years prior to The Phantom Menace. That's pure speculation on my part. Okay, that's just a guess. Because I just don't think the timeline works out for Taika Waititi. Okay, so let me talk a little bit about Taika Waititi before we move on to your listener feedback this week. I love the idea of Taika Waititi directing a Star Wars movie. And here's the reason why. It's in the article. His ability to oscillate tones, scope, and budget. I personally, and this is just a personal preference, I personally love Taika Waititi's style of humor. I love that brand of irreverent humor. I really enjoy What We Do in the Shadows, the vampire movie. If you haven't seen it, I even liked the bit part role that he ended up playing in Green Lantern, opposite Ryan Reynolds. I thought his little buddy role in that movie was fantastic. It cracked me up later on when I found out that was Taika Waititi in that movie. He also knows how to have fun, and he's got a looseness about him. For example, he's going to be in the other Ryan Reynolds movie coming out, New Guy, where Ryan Reynolds plays an NPC inside a video game, and Taika Waititi's been in the trailers, and I thought about that when this announcement broke about him potentially doing a Star Wars movie, because I'm like, man, he still likes to act. He likes to be goofy. He doesn't take himself too seriously. And his brand of humor is on point. That last episode of The Mandalorian is fantastic. And it's got everything in it just like Thor Ragnarok does. And that final episode of Mandalorian that he directed, it's got this really great balance. And I understand that that's not everybody's sense of humor. Like the two speeder bike troopers, right, at the beginning of the last episode of The Mandalorian. And I know people were like, that was Jason Sudeikis and Adam Pally playing those two troopers. I know people got upset apparently at Jason Sudeikis for punching baby Yoda. He's not real, right? Chilota's just a puppet. Anyway, but the action in that is really good, and the suspense is really good. Thor Ragnarok is one of my favorite Marvel movies. It's funnier than most, right? It goes out there for the humor, but his sense of comedic timing is spot on. There's no doubt about that. But the dialogue is good, the writing is good, the acting is great, and the action is top-notch. The action sequences in Thor Ragnarok are spectacular. They're very Star Wars-esque. That whole scene when they are escaping the planet to head back to Asgard, and they get in the Supreme Leader, or whatever his name is, Jeff Goldblum's ship, and it's my birthday, or all of that. But that whole action sequence, when Valkyrie and Thor are jumping all, it is spectacular. So his ability to direct action is great. The IG-11 on the speeder bike with Baby Yoda racing around in that last episode of Mandalorian is fantastic. So the idea of Taika Waititi doing a Star Wars movie has me through the moon excited. The only question I have is if he is supposed to be doing the first new Star Wars movie, that would be a question mark to me, because I feel like that 2022 movie has to, for lack of a better term, right? That Star Wars theatrical 2022 movie, they got to put their big boy pants on. That's got to be a big, in my opinion, it's got to be a big, we're coming out of the gate strong to reestablish a new set of mythology in a different timeline we've never explored. I don't see that 2022 movie being something that's a little bit more lighthearted. I feel like that movie has to be very, very big and grandiose. And that's just my opinion. And I'm not sure that Taika Waititi is the person to go and handle that type of big film. I could be wrong. I can see Taika Waititi maybe doing a second one, or maybe doing a side movie. Now, it could very well be that Disney and Lucasfilm have changed their plans a bit when it comes to the theatrical releases, and maybe, we know that they've kind of abandoned the idea of a trilogy. Rian Johnson recently came out again and said he was still talking with Lucasfilm, but they haven't announced their slate. He's going to be doing another Knives Out movie, so I don't think that his movie is going to be the 2022 movie, but we just don't know. And I also don't, I still think that Disney loves Rian Johnson, don't get me wrong, but if there was ever going to be something that Disney did because of the minority negativity to the Last Jedi, I would think that they would wait a movie or two before they bring back out Rian Johnson's another Rian Johnson Star Wars movie. But what do you think? Again, comment on the Colin Trevorrow Episode 9 treatment and the script. Taika Waititi doing a Star Wars movie, right? Would you want to see him do the next big budget Star Wars in the movie theater film, or would you rather see him doing a side story? Okay. Who do you think should direct that 2022 movie? Should it be a Steven Spielberg, or should it be somebody who, like a Dave Filoni? Email me, talkshownerd@gmail.com. You can also leave a comment on YouTube if you're watching the YouTube video of the show. And I want to mention that, too. For those that are listening to the podcast version of the show, thank you so much for doing that. I appreciate it. Make sure you subscribe to wherever you listen to the podcast. But there is a video version available on YouTube. It's exactly the same thing you're listening to, but you get to see my big old fat face, and I put some images up on occasion and run some videos and get busted for copyright issues. So if you do watch it on YouTube, thank you very much. Like everybody else says, like and subscribe, share it with friends. I'm trying to build the YouTube audience because I used to just post the audio version on YouTube, but I really wanted to do a video version. So if you're listening to the podcast, and you go, oh, I wonder what this fool looks like, go to YouTube and look for My Nerd World, and you'll go and see it there. All right. I guess that's it. Let's go to. We got a lot of listener feedback this week. Let's dive right into it. All right. We'll start off with Christine Douglas, who writes this. When episode 9 came out, I knew you were going to be the only person with a platform who I can trust on whether this was a good movie or not. Oh, you're far too trusting. Just like many of your listeners, I'm so glad you loved this movie. Although I'm really struggling with the death of Ben Solo. You've said a couple times now on the podcast that Ben couldn't have lived because that's not how the world works. I think I'm interpreting your words right. My issue with that is I don't watch movies to watch reality. If I wanted to do that, I would just turn on the news and certainly wouldn't be watching science fiction for that matter. Okay, let me stop here. Because that's not what I mean at all. I actually mean quite the opposite. And I was actually talking to my wife about this after watching The Rise of Skywalker today for the 9th time. Star Wars is not the real world. The real world morality rules don't apply in the Star Wars universe, right? If they did, this would be a completely different ballgame, and Star Wars would have an entirely different version of the Me Too movement, and Kylo Ren should have been killed a long time ago for the number of individuals that he went and murdered. Okay, it doesn't work that way. So I apologize if you misinterpreted what I said. Now, I did say that Ben needed to die for the story, in my opinion. Not because of the real world, but actually because of in-universe, galaxy far, far away, their version of the real world. I know people disagree with me, and that's fine. That's just my opinion. But Kylo Ren came back, and I chronicled this a bunch on last week's show. So if you want to hear this, the longer version of this, go and listen to last week's episode. But Kylo Ren committed far too many atrocities, in my opinion, to make it out of The Rise of Skywalker completely unscathed. And his passing to me was very poignant and beautiful, and because of the things that he'd done in the past, it was necessary, in my opinion. So I believe he needed to die at the end of The Rise of Skywalker, not because of the real world, but actually because of inside of Star Wars. And there's just certain things you can be redeemed. And like I said last week, that moment was a perfect moment for him. Rey smiling at him, looking so beautiful, and him smiling back, and her decision to kiss him before he gave himself into the Force was just emotional. It was tragic, and it was just beautiful. And I wouldn't want the ending any other way. All right. Let's get back to Christine's comment. Frankly, she says, they left a lot unfinished, which makes me wonder if the studio is actually done with these characters and plot lines. Last thing I just want to share with someone else. The moment I heard Rey Skywalker, I thought it's because she knew she would have married Ben if he had survived. Not sure if there is any stock in that possibility, but since they didn't explain that, that's what I'm concluding. Okay, now Christine wrote again later on this week. And this was after her third viewing of The Rise of Skywalker. And she said this: my mom went with me, and she's been a fan since the first movies. On the way home, I was saying how sad I was that Ben died. And my mom instantly said something like, oh no, he was too broken. She saved his soul when she healed him. He redeemed himself when he sacrificed himself for her. I totally agree with you that this is a movie you have to see more than once. Even on the third trip, I saw so many scenes or moments that I didn't before. I have decided that this is my favorite Star Wars movie, and I love the sequel trilogy the most. The sequel trilogy brings back everything we love, which was incredible to be a part of, since I'm old enough to remember going and experiencing these movies in the theater. I also appreciated seeing Rey, a young woman, being the Jedi in the trilogy, and that it was based around. Not to take away from Leia being a strong woman, but she wasn't a Jedi. Anyways, those are my additional thoughts I wanted to share. Thank you very much, Christine. And I mentioned this last week, and I want to say it again. The soundtrack for The Rise of Skywalker is the best soundtrack for me in the sequel trilogy. And it's the first time that John Williams has been able to create a new piece of music that gives me the exact feels that I get when I'm watching any of the original trilogy, and especially The Empire Strikes Back. The one track in the theme that I'm thinking of is the one where all the friends are together, and on the soundtrack it's called We Go Together. I just adore that piece of music. It's absolutely fantastic, in my opinion. All right, friend of the show, Ann Fasuvi, says this. Last night I was at the cinema to see Uncut Gems in 1917, and in between I had a few minutes to kill, so I quietly entered the auditorium for the 7 p.m. showing of The Rise of Skywalker. I was surprised that despite it being a weeknight, the auditorium was half full. Yeah, we went to the 11 o'clock today, and it was more than half full. But what did strike me was how quiet everyone was. Yep. These viewers were a general audience, clearly. But aside from not gasping, screaming, and cheering and applauding, they did whisper things like, "That was good," or "I liked that," as they were filtering out of the exit. It is wild how varied cinematic experiences can be. I do hope that patrons in public venues will give their best efforts to be respectful of others, allowing them to enjoy what they enjoy. Like the old song goes, nobody is going to rain on my parade. Thank you, Aunt Fasuvi. And there's an email that we'll get to a little bit later on in the show that addresses something that I talked about at length last week, and that was that private showing for The Rise of Skywalker, where everybody went and got really upset and was screaming at the screen at the end of the film. Somebody brings that up at the end in one of the listener feedbacks this week, and so I'll be addressing that in more detail a little bit later on in the show. All right, friend of the show, Miranda says this: at the risk of sounding cynical and obnoxious, let me say that I have something to say. Who really cares about the box office, and why is everybody making such a big mama fuss about it just because it's not reaching Force Awakens or The Last Jedi levels? We all knew that was going to happen, but for real, can we stop fussing about it? It's doing just fine. My take on that whole thing, by the way, and I'm with you, I follow the box office just because I want to see this thing that I love so much do well, but I do absolutely agree with you. We shouldn't be focused as fans on the box office. Now, that being said, let me give you my theory. My theory with this, with the sequel trilogy in the box office, is not that The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker made less money, underperformed, and made less than The Force Awakens. I've always been of the opinion that The Force Awakens overperformed, and that it was a mistake to think that the subsequent movies in the sequel trilogy would ever make as much money as The Force Awakens did. The Force Awakens was a return of Star Wars. After 10 years and the prequels and the negativity surrounding the prequels, people were excited, and a lot of average, everyday people went and saw the film that normally wouldn't go to see the film. And for a lot of those people, just seeing that return was enough. And if you're not a hardcore fan, I could see how many people wouldn't return for The Last Jedi. If you're a casual fan and you went to go see The Force Awakens, you probably walked out going, it was okay. And I bet many of them walked out going, that was a lot like the original Star Wars. The Force Awakens overperformed. In my view, the future of Star Wars films is always going to be more along the lines of The Last Jedi in terms of box office and The Rise of Skywalker, right? I'm sure that'll change depending on what they're able to do, if they're able to sort of capture the Marvel Cinematic Universe magic that they have. But when you think about it, if Star Wars movies from here on out just performed the way The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker did, that would be overperforming what the majority of the Marvel movies do, apart from the big saga movies, right? Your Avengers and your Endgame and your Infinity War and all that. All right, back to Miranda's email. I would rather we all become a better fandom. Let's not worry about these fandom menace YouTubers who shriek like little girls who dropped their dolly and sound the alarm with everything that comes out of Star Wars news and go on an SJW exposition and gossip. Also, and this is to the Reylo community, Miranda writes, please, my dear Reylo sisters and some of our Reylo brothers, please stop worrying and obsessing over the ending or let it bother you, and especially stop overreacting on who said what in what interview, you know which ones. Yeah, Miranda, I tend to agree. All right, let's move over to Disney Desi, who writes this. The fact that Across the Stars plays at the beginning of A New Hope makes me feel like John Williams scored the ending thinking Ben and Rey wind up together on Tatooine. I don't know. I mean, I don't think that's the case. John Williams says that he watches the film and doesn't listen to it or read the script and then writes the music for it. So I don't think he has any sort of inside track on any of that. All right. Moving on. Eddie's account writes this. I've been listening to your show for a while, and I love your positivity. Thank you, Eddie. For me, these 3 films destroyed the Skywalker story completely. The foundation of the story was Anakin Skywalker, and he had nothing to do with these last 3 films. They killed off Ben Solo and left the film with Rey as the last Skywalker. I've seen it twice, and the best scenes were between Ben and Rey. I just can't accept these movies as canon. Love your show. Thank you, Eddie, and I hope you continue to love the show. I disagree. But that's fine. We can all have our opinion. I laid this out on a previous podcast that I've always been of the opinion that these are sequels to the other 6 movies that came before them. And because of that, they're allowed to go and potentially change things that happened in the previous movies. Now, that being said, apart from bringing Palpatine back, they didn't really go, in my mind, and change anything in terms of the canon. Anakin Skywalker is a part of the sequel trilogy, inasmuch as Ben Solo is definitely obsessed with, Kylo Ren, definitely obsessed with Darth Vader, and we even hear Anakin in the last movie. He's there in the background. But the sequel trilogy was always about passing off the torch to the new characters, and I have always been completely fine with that, right? It's just a matter of perspective. I don't see the sequel trilogy undermining anything of what the original trilogy did or the prequel trilogy did. You know, it's funny because after watching The Rise of Skywalker all these times, I've come to this sort of realization that The Rise of Skywalker is a really unique Star Wars movie in and of itself. It's very pulpy. It's very comic booky, and that's all a really good thing in my book. It's almost 2.5 hours long, but man, it feels like an hour and a half the way that it trucks. And I like the way it plays out. And I love the story. I love the story, every aspect of it. All right. Bonnie writes this. I just found your podcast because I'm tired of my Tumblr being nothing but hashtag Ben Solo deserved better, hashtag release the JJ cut, sign this petition to change the movie, hashtag we deserved better, hashtag anti-TROS, hashtag wah, etc. It's annoying, LOL. I want to hear positive things and people discussing The Rise of Skywalker in a positive way, even if people didn't like it. Instead of this frustrating, negative, I didn't get what I wanted conversation. I will admit that I had mixed feelings after seeing Rise on opening night. I've seen the movie 3 times now, and I like it much more each time I watch it. I'm interested to know how you feel The Rise of Skywalker fares as a conclusion to the saga. Would you ever do an episode or segment where you discuss how the prequels, originals, and sequels align as a whole story? Yes, absolutely. I asked this because of something I heard on another podcast. They made the point, in response to all the fan freak out about Rise, The future generations who will get to see all 9 movies for the first time won't have the problem of having to wait X number of years between films or trilogies. They'll be able to just pop in the movies one after another and have the answers. And so they won't have the need to make things up in their heads while they wait and then be disappointed when they don't happen, which color and how well they like the movies overall. From that perspective, which can color how well they like the movies overall. From that perspective, I wondered how the story overall would add up for them. Does that all make sense? Do the elements and concepts carry over well from trilogy to trilogy? I'm in the middle of testing this myself, and so far, I think it does all work for the most part, but I'd love to get your take. Yeah, so here's the deal, Bonnie. I think future generations looking at all 9 Star Wars movies are going to understand that these are actually 3 trilogies from 3 different eras, and they all reflect those eras. Star Wars isn't James Bond, where they just kind of do movies and they just kind of go, right? And there's no, like, arcs for the most part, apart from the more recent ones. It's not Lord of the Rings, which was all done by one director and shot consecutively, so it's all very uniform. This was not George Lucas's. That was not what George Lucas wanted to do. Apart from the prequel trilogy, he wanted other directors to come in and play in his sandbox and create different films to go and watch. That was his intention all along. I was listening to Star Wars Underworld, and they had a guest on there, and it was really interesting because the guest didn't seem to care all that much, or at least one of the hosts. I don't know if he was a guest, but I hadn't listened to their podcast in a while. But I was listening to the most recent one, and they were discussing The Rise of Skywalker. And they started talking about how The Rise of Skywalker was a lot like Return of the King from Lord of the Rings. And there's definitely some comparisons there. But then they started saying, but they didn't do this, which would have been like Return of the King, and they really should. And they didn't do this like they did in Return of the King, and they really should have done this in The Rise of Skywalker. And again, this goes back to something I was saying earlier. I thought it was really odd because I'm like, well, but it's not Return of the King. So why are you trying to turn it into Return of the King? It's Star Wars. It's different. It's not supposed to be something else. Okay. So all that is to say, I will do that at some point in time on the podcast, right? Break down and talk about the prequels and the originals and the sequels and how they all fit together. But I think future generations, when they look at these films, because it's already happening in my household, I think they will look at these and understand them for what they are. The sequel trilogy is very much 2000s. The prequel trilogy is very much the 90s. And the original trilogy is very much the 80s. So it's 80s, 90s, and 2000s. It's pretty easy. And movies have all changed since then, and they'll continue to change. When we get into the 2025s and 2030s and the 2050s, I guarantee Star Wars is going to feel a lot different. It's like the game of telephone. You start off in one part of the room and everybody whispers the same thing in somebody's ear. And the first person said, I'm wearing red shoes. And by the time you get to the last person, after everybody whispered in their ears, he comes back with, the dog has red ears. That's just how it works. And I'm convinced that as we get further down the line, Star Wars is not going to resemble as much of what we see now. Very similar to the way that the prequel trilogy doesn't feel like the original trilogy. The Force Awakens did a really good job, and J.J. Abrams did, of making that kind of feel like the original trilogy. But then you get to The Last Jedi, which I also think is the reason why there's such a strong minority backlash to that film. The Force Awakens was really the first movie in all the Star Wars films that took a big risk to make it different, and I love it for that. And then you get to The Rise of Skywalker, which in my opinion is very much a 2000s film, right? In terms of the pacing, in terms of the editing, how kinetic it is, absolutely a 2000s film. All right. Winter in Bloom writes this. You like Jupiter Ascending, ! 3 times. I thought I was literally the only one. Yeah, man, I dig Jupiter Ascending. It's a fun little science fiction movie. So is Valerian. It's both good space operas. All right. Everson writes this. For the love of the creator, I love this film. It is my favorite episode now. It's right up there with episode 3. The more I think about it, the more I realize how amazing it is, especially the third act with the Senate, Ben Solo, and my babe girl, Rey Skywalker. By the way, I cannot stress how much I love Daisy Ridley and her portrayal of Rey in The Rise of Skywalker. I just love that character so much in that film on so many different levels. All right. I'm part of the new generation. So I've been following the Skywalker saga since I was 12 years old in 2015. And it's great to see such a perfect conclusion to the story. I can't even imagine how important it must be for you who grew up watching these films. Let me thank you, Everson, and let me love from Brazil. Wow, may the force be with you, John. Thank you very much. I'm going to dovetail back into something that Bonnie asked in here too. How does the Rise of Skywalker concludes the saga? When I watched it today for the 9th time, at the very, very end, before the credits rolled, what popped into my head was this movie and this sequel trilogy is about the fans. Right? And I won't get all into it because there's something to be said about what each prequel trilogy means. But the sequel trilogy, to me, at the end, I see Rey there, and what I see are the fans there. Right? I'm Rey Skywalker. And I just love that about the movie. It doesn't bother me that she was a Palpatine. I think it's a slap in his face. She killed him, and now he's gone, and so is his legacy because she took the legacy name. She took the name of the individuals that caused him so much frustration in his attempt to rule the galaxy. And she shoved it in his face and I'm not going to be you. I'm Rey Skywalker. But when I saw her standing there with BB-8, I just thought, we're the fans. We're all Rey. We can all be Rey Skywalker, right? That's what I think it's a great conclusion to the saga. As good a conclusion to the saga as Return of the Jedi was. Easily. No question in my mind. All right. Aurora Amosith Australia. If I got that wrong, I am sorry. But they write this. We'll call you AAA. How's that? I agree with you. I'm trying to stay away from social media negativity because it's so toxic. Because I saw people who were getting aggressive about the movie, especially to the directly concerned, almost making me feel dumb. Speaking of it, I reacted to one of those comments. I didn't find the movie dumb at all. It's so rich, I had to focus a lot along to understand everything. I've watched it 4 times. I was at peace when I saw that Rey was somehow in harmony after Ben's death, even if she shed tears, because I thought that part of her Jedi training had her having a different approach to death, especially when one embraces the Force. And I was like, wow, I'm happy for her that she will be all right. Also, Ben died happy. To me, it wasn't a matter of deserving death or not. To me, it was a matter of that he accomplished what his life goal was. As a person and as a Jedi, so he embraced the Force. He also finished what his grandpa started, protecting his loved one. Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with that, AAA, and thank you so much for the comment. All right, let's go here, and Jared, friend of the show, writes this. I've seen The Rise of Skywalker 3 separate times now, and each time I loved it. I loved it immediately when I saw it for the first time in the theater, and after I heard it was getting mixed reviews from both sides of the fandom, started to bum me out. Like you, I try to push any negativity out the window whilst being open to criticism in order to just enjoy the things I love, such as Reylo. I saw it a 3rd time this weekend and enjoyed it much more like the way I loved it on the first viewing. I still think the plot is McClunky as heck, and we deserved more fleshed out answers to the questions surrounding our main characters. I would have preferred if Ben had survived and was forced to atone for his sins with the help of Rey. I believe a cut exists which is more aligned with what JJ and the majority of fans and Reylos had envisioned. Doubt that an alternate cut, extended cut, would fix everything, but it would certainly help to make the dialogue, plot, and emotional beats stronger, tighter, and cleaner. What are your thoughts on hopefully getting to see an alternate cut of the film? I deeply love and enjoy this movie despite its flaws, but I can't help thinking that there is an even better version out there that we deserve to see. Because I love you and Girls with Savers, peace, love, and Reylo, Jared. All right. So, here's my thoughts on that. Let's start off with J.J. Abrams and the alternate cut. We don't know that's the case. And this goes back to what I was talking about towards the start of the show. And the fact that we as fans know way too much about the way that these movies are made, and then that ends up turning into clickbait articles and rampant speculation on alternative cuts and all this nonsense. I don't believe a lick of what was put out on social media from somebody who claimed to be an insider that says that J.J. Abrams didn't like had his movie chopped up by Disney and Lucasfilm, and it wasn't the movie and the version that I don't believe any of that. We don't know what the production process of this film was like, nor do we know if there were any problems at all whatsoever. We have no official information. All we've heard is rampant speculation, and I don't buy any of it. I just don't. Now, we know that there was a bunch of stuff cut from the film. The editors have said as much, okay? We know that they thought a lot about the decisions that we're making, and they had to tinker with it, but that happens on every single movie. Do I want to see an alternate cut? Absolutely. Who wouldn't? Who wouldn't want to see more Star Wars deleted scenes in a longer cut? Give me a 4-hour cut. Give me a 3-hour cut. I'd love to watch it. Do I need it? No, not at all. Do I think this is the film that J.J. Abrams wanted to release? Absolutely, I think this is the film that J.J. Abrams wanted to release. I don't think he would have done this movie if he hadn't been given free rein to do the movie that he wanted to do. So I don't buy into the hype that this was a troubled production and that J.J. Abrams put out a product that he was not happy with and he did not cut or he did not like. Now, Jared, I say this with all respect, and I just want to make one particular comment. Twice in your email, you said there's a better version that we deserve to see. And before that, you also said, I still think the plot is McClunky as heck and we deserved more fleshed out answers. Okay. Everyone's entitled to their opinion, so I mean no disrespect. But in my opinion, we don't deserve anything. We're just fans, right? We're just consumers. Star Wars does not owe us anything whatsoever. So I don't feel like I deserve to see an explanation about where Kylo Ren got, or Ben Solo got the TIE Fighter from, or how it got to Exegol without a hyperdrive. I don't deserve an answer as to why there's an X-Wing on Luke's door in his hut on Octo, and yet that X-Wing seems to be completely in one piece. I know that Matt Martin online said that they digitally altered the X-Wing to have it miss a piece of the wing. I watched the movie today on the big screen, and that X-Wing looks completely intact. I don't deserve to. They don't owe me anything. Whatever. They made the movie. I don't deserve to know why it looked like Snap Wexley was getting into an A-wing, and yet in the battle over Exegol, he was flying an X-Wing that he died in. So that's just my opinion. I don't think that we as fans deserve, Disney and Lucasfilm don't owe us anything, right? We can consume their product or we don't have to. That's our choice. All right. Josh writes this. Someone asked Matt Martin about Luke's X-Wing door. He said, if you look closely at Luke's X-Wing, when Rey lands on Exegol, pretty sure you can see that a panel is missing on one side. I did not. And I've been looking for it. So, by the way, if somebody has a photo of that taken from one of the leaked versions of the film that you can share with me, please do. TalkShowNerd@gmail.com, because I would love to go and see that for myself. All right. FN1189 says this. In an interview from around 1983, Mark Hamill reveals that George Lucas was considering a series of future Star Wars films where Luke would be an Obi-Wan type character, handing Excalibur down to the next generation. If there was a concrete plan for the sequel trilogy, I really believe that was a very important component of that. From my observation, one key ingredient to the sequel trilogy cake was having that trio from the original trilogy, passing the torch to the next generation of Star Wars heroes. Each film of this trilogy would be centered around one of those original trilogy characters. TFA was Han, TLJ was Luke, and for The Rise of Skywalker, it was Leia, and we ultimately got that. If Carrie had lived to see through this trilogy to the end, I think the outcome would have been far different. The Rise of Skywalker was probably the best conclusion we could have gotten given the loss of one of the most important figures. They made the best conclusion they could, and I still stand by that. That's a hill I'm going to die on. Hopefully one day some of us can find peace with the trilogy capper, given the less than ideal circumstances of how we got here. Stay classy, McClunkies, and may the Force be with you. Thank you, FN1189. I appreciate that. All right, Globe-Trotting Tiffers writes this. Thank you for your podcast this week. I was especially touched by your discussion of Ben's progression and your own personal experiences as a father and a husband and what it means to show the ultimate act of true love. I agree that this film and other Star Wars films take more than one viewing. I didn't love this movie the first time, and I've seen it now 4 times, and I can say that I do love it. Thank you for being a positive place to spend good quality Star Wars time. This is the way. Thank you very much, Globe-Trotting Tiffers. I really appreciate that. All right, 2QAYL1138 says this. I'm working on prefacing my opinions with to me. Thank you for setting a good example on that front. You're welcome. I don't want Star Wars to go away because of the negativity, just like George Lucas did. I've tried to come up with a better term to describe my brand of fandom, but I might not be able to do better than Star Wars apologist. Yep. To me, Star Wars is what the movies gives us. Nothing in them doesn't feel like Star Wars, whether it's Ewoks, special editions, or Jar Jar, or Poe's mama jokes, or Holdo maneuvers, or magical powers seemingly out of nowhere. I've seen 9 6 times now, and every time without fail, whether I'm in a packed theater or an empty one, I can't help but get the urge throughout the movie to do a victory pose and celebrate how happy it makes me. Thank you very much for the email. All right. Misconduct 1, friend of the show, writes this. Let's see. I actually heard, My Nerd World with John Justice. Definitely, I wasn't being snarky, I promise. I actually heard that recording way before that young man on Twitter posted it. So this is going back to the audio of the people in the theater screaming at the theater and cursing because Rey said Rey Skywalker at the end of the film. Okay. It didn't surprise me. They are really hurt by some of the things that happened in the movie. I'm still feeling like they aren't understanding what they did, leaving the ending open. You can call me crazy if you want, but I think he's alive. If he was really dead, they would have showed us that Force ghost. I don't think any of the people in the private screening would do those things in mixed company at a public viewing. So it's their money. They paid for their private screening ticket with their people. Let them get their emotions out however they want. Exactly. And that's how I've always felt. I do not understand, and this is not aimed at you, Misconduct 1, but this is what happened with that Twitter thread from last week that I talked about. I don't understand how people took that to mean in my asking that I was mad that people were yelling at the screen. I said all along, if it was a private screening, man, that's fine. Private screening, you guys can do whatever it is that you want to do, right? You paid for it. You all know what you're going to do. If it was a public screening and people were acting that way, it's a completely different ballgame. All right. Getting back to her email. I'm thinking that was the whole point of going the route of the private screening. Okay. Everyone left that theater alive, so I say they did a great job of handling their anger and frustration. I say it's okay for people to feel however they want. In life in general, it's just part of being human. No, absolutely. And again, like I said, being a private screening is a completely different scenario. Okay, and I'm going to get there's another email that talks about this that I'll get into a little bit more when we get to that one. She wraps up saying this: Ben Solo is a treasure trove of stories for future content. Aaron Quinton has done a great, solid theory about Ben Solo not transforming into the Force, but being transported somewhere else. Where? Don't know. Maybe the world between worlds. The netherworld, who knows, but wherever he is gives the opportunity for his hero journey story to begin and find his way back to Rey. I'm not anticipating that happening in the future. I'm personally of the opinion that maybe we'll get some ancillary material post The Rise of Skywalker about Ben Solo, but to be quite honest with you, I think his story is done. Right? In as much as Darth Vader's story and Anakin Skywalker's story was done in Return of the Jedi, and I don't personally think that Adam Driver is coming back to do any more Star Wars. That's just my opinion, though. All right, let's see. Let's go to Luna Gurr. I don't think what happened on Twitter was directly related to The Rise of Skywalker. I just think that many groups of people feel like they're on the front lines of some battle. In this case, that group of young women, right? And you, a man, lobbed your opinion into their ranks. Everything is examined with a microscope today for any hint of offense. As an older woman in my mid-40s, I don't feel that level of hostility aimed at me in the fandom. Again, as you said, it is a perception thing. All right, we'll get to one more this week. There is more listener feedback, but looking at the clock, we need to wrap the show up this week. I will get to more of your comments that you sent in this week, and we'll do that again on next week's show, along with whatever new emails we get. So again, if I didn't get to your email this week, I will get to it again next week, but we'll wrap up on this. Longtime listener, Ep9 says this: people are allowed positive vocal emotions, i.e. clapping and laughing, but not negative. I wouldn't like knowing negative opinions are present in the theater, but I would allow it. The thing I wouldn't accept are turning on your phone or smoking or anything mentioned in the clip before the movie. If we have to suppress our emotions, that's a bad thing, and it'll fester, and sooner or later they bubble up in an uncontrolled expression. Okay, so we'll wrap up on, I think I'll do one more because I don't want to wrap up on, it's kind of a negative one. I don't want to wrap up on a negative one. So we'll do one more here before. But let me address this one, and then, again, we'll do one more. We'll do one more email. So, again, the people in that clip, I'm just going to say for the record, the people in that clip that we saw, if that had been a public screening, I would have been, and I was in the theater, I would have been incredibly upset. Okay? I understand that movie-going experiences can get raucous, right? But, and this is just my opinion, the raucousness, to me, needs to be and should be on a positive level in a public screening, right? People laughing, that's an obvious emotion, along with the film. People going, yeah, or clapping at the end of the movie, right? But getting hysterical, or, like I've talked about many times, guffawing at Rey and Ben kissing at the end of the movie, or laughing when he dies. To me, that's ruining somebody else's experience, in my opinion. But since that particular video that's caused so much controversy was a private screening, whatever, man, they can act however they want. I just know that when I go see a movie, that's what I expect. I don't expect people to be talking during the film. I think that's incredibly disrespectful. But natural positive reactions to what's happening on screen, or natural reactions to what's happening on screen, is fine with me, right? Somebody who doesn't like it, in my view, just keep it to yourself, because you don't want to ruin it for the person that does like it. All right, one more, and then we're going to wrap things up. Luna Gur said, no, not Luna Gur, sorry. We're going to go to Greg from the UK. Just wanted to send you a message. I found your podcast after searching for Star Wars content. It's great to listen to you talk about Star Wars and why you love it. I find it strange that people choose to do podcasts and just complain. I'm not really a fan of that. I find it very uninteresting. I love The Rise of Skywalker and all the other the other two sequel trilogy films. I find them a great addition to the saga and find that they have great depth. Star Wars fans have become very tiresome, and really, they had started to take the shine off my fandom for the past year or so. I came to the realization that none of the noise matters, just my enjoyment of the films and books. Amen, brother. I love Star Wars, and I always will. If people want to complain, fair enough, but they are missing out on all the fun. I'm 38. I've been a fan since I was very young, and I will continue to read about Star Wars, watch it on television, and go to the cinema and watch the latest installment of whatever story they come up with next. Thanks again for your great podcast. Kind regards, Greg, a UK listener. Thank you very much, Greg. I really do appreciate that. I love Star Wars. I really, really do. There's obviously no doubt about that. Next week, we'll get to more of your listener feedback. I do want to talk more about The Rise of Skywalker, and I actually want to start going through the film. My plan is between now and next week's show is I'm going to basically break up the story so that I can discuss it in portions throughout the next several weeks, because there's a lot to talk about specifically with the film, and I've done sort of long overviews on it, but I really want to get into some of the minutia and the things that I really enjoy about it. So, your homework assignment, if you choose to accept it, is drop me an email, talkshownerd@gmail.com, or you can always leave a comment on YouTube and talk about the film. What do you like about it? What are the parts of the movie that you enjoy the most? Right? Zero in on something, right? If you think, ooh, I really want to talk about this moment of the movie. I love the little moment after they go through the sinking field and Rey turns on her lightsaber to see, and she does this sort of squinting and she's looking around, and then Poe turns the flashlight on and realizes it's not a lightsaber. I mean, there's just so many little moments like that in the movie that I absolutely adore. But I want to know what you love about the film as well. So we're going to focus on the very first part of the movie. So I'm thinking, just off the top of my head, we'll do from the opening probably until the light speed skipping. I think we'll probably handle that portion. So if you want to comment on the beginning part of the movie, again, talkshownerd@gmail.com, or leave a comment up on YouTube. As always, if you want to support the show and you haven't done so already, please go and pick up a copy of either one or both of my science fiction space opera novels. They're called EMBARK. They're written because of my love of Star Wars, and the reviews have been great. Book 3 is coming out in the next few months. I'm continuing to edit it. If you've purchased the books already, thank you very much. Please go and leave a positive review if you haven't. I really need more reviews. If you purchased the book and you still want to support the show, pick up a copy for a friend. Get them the paperback or gift them an ebook version right there on Amazon. There's a little link right there on the purchase page. Just go to Amazon.com, search for EMBARK and John, J-O-N, Justice, and you'll find Book 1 and Treasure in Darkness Book 2 and The Vanishing War coming here in the next couple of months. I really, really would appreciate it. And remember, a purchase of the ebook gets you a big discount on the audiobook, which is produced and voiced, narrated by me. So you can get the audiobook as well. Also, the podcast Zeng This, Z-E-N-G This, Zeng This. Zenger is the host. I had the opportunity to go on his show, which should be coming out Thursday, I believe, this week. Wednesday or Thursday. And he's a big fan of the books, which was amazing. It was one of the most exciting interviews that I've done. And really, I really hope you'll go and check it out because Zenger, who is also on the Knights of Vader podcast, which I enjoy quite a bit, my buddy Zach over there, he's on the Knights of Vader podcast as well. He really enjoyed my books, and this was the first opportunity where I actually was able to be interviewed by a fan of something that I created, and it was a real special hour for me, and I can't wait to hear the show back. So once it's available, I'll certainly promote it on next week's show, but be sure to go check it out. It's a really good podcast, too. Zeng This is a really good podcast. Zenger's a great guy. So that should be out a little bit later on this week. All right. I think that's it. I think I'm going to watch Solo tonight. That's my plan. So hope you're having a great day, depending on when you're watching this. We got snow falling like 8 inches this weekend. It's nutty. So I'm going to be hanging indoors watching TV, which is my favorite thing to do. So as always, thank you so much for checking out the show. Leave a comment, talkshownerd@gmail.com or on YouTube. And be sure to like and subscribe if you're watching this on YouTube, or subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to the podcast from. And may the Force be with you. Here is Obi-Wan Kenobi to essentially go and tell you the same thing.
The Force will be with you, always.
My nerd world.